Career change. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Well, maybe not just change, prepping for it, figuring out what you really want to do in life, finding your purpose. Sometimes you have no choice but to look at new opportunities. Sometimes it's niggling at you. You just want to check out, what could I be doing that would give me more fulfillment, make me fulfill my destiny and my passions. Today, my guest is Joanna Chavers. She has been doing this professionally, helping people with it for many, many years with Atrium Global. And she's not just done it for individuals. She has coached people truly from the field, like think NFL, football players from the field into the office. So she knows how to help people transition. Welcome, Joanna.
Hi, happy to be here. Thanks for the introduction.
My gosh, this is going to be so much fun to talk to you. Let's start here. People talk about passion in their work. Now, sometimes people automatically find their passion. Sometimes you have to work towards it. Sometimes you have to have multiple jobs to get it. What are your thoughts about being passionate about your role at work?
Yeah, it's the driving force, I think, behind why I do what I do. I'm passionate about it, and it's something that I want to bring to others all the time. And I feel like for a lot of people, they don't approach work that way. They approach it from what's going to pay me the most, or what's a cool place to work, or, my family told me I should go into this industry. And that's not you. That's not what you want or who you are. And I think once you find a role, a space, an industry, whatever it is that you're really passionate about, it really changes things for you. It helps you not feel like I'm just working and I'm just collecting a paycheck, but I'm really contributing meaningfully. It's energizing my soul. It's making me feel fulfilled. And then I think work's a lot easier to digest every day.
That was a great answer and a really good way to look at things. So I'm curious. You coach people regularly. I talk to people regularly and they say, "Oh, Diane, you talk about purpose. You talk about passion. How the heck do I find my purpose or passion?" What would you say to someone as a professional coach in the human resources world as to how can you find your passion or purpose?
Yeah, it takes a moment of self-reflection or maybe a few moments and some discovery and some conversation. We also use a behavioral assessment here at Atrium that I coach a lot with, that is Predictive Index. And it analyzes your natural drivers and motivators and maps that for you, and then gives you a description of who you are at the core, what you need, how you work with others, how you like to be managed, how you man. I think that's really important in understanding yourself and starting there first. So then every time you look at a job description, you're saying, is this aligned? Does this speak to who I am? They're looking for somebody really detailed. Do I have that? Do I want to be that? Do I approach situations that way? They need somebody really extroverted. Am I comfortable in those situations? Do I love to talk to people, or is it draining for me? Or, I move at a really fast pace. Is this job really repetitive and steady? And am I going to be bored? All of these different areas are important for you to understand about yourself, because then when you're looking at a job description, you're looking at it through two lenses, right? What is the work and how is the work applying to me and who I am? And then from there, you take that information into the interview. And it's really great to have a candidate who's really confident in who they are and who knows who they are and knows why they're a fit for the job, and then can communicate that to you, can question you as the hiring manager to say, okay, tell me a little bit about yourself, hiring manager. This is who I am. I'd love to know how we'll work best together. And I think being assured in who you are and what you want just lends its way really nicely into the job search and figuring out what the next step is for you.
It's so funny. You mentioned personality tests. And I've had people I've spoken with who say, I worked my hardest to beat that personality test. I'm like, what do you mean to beat it? They were like, well, I just didn't want to be classified. I didn't want it to tell me who I was or have my boss think they now know who I was. I'm like, okay, that's one way you could look at it. And then I kind of always looked at them for many years. I viewed them kind of like a generalist horoscope that, oh, we're going to group you into these categories. And, is there any real relevance? And then I found my mother had saved a test that I took when I was in fifth grade that said I would either be a psychologist or a writer. And I thought, if that's not the funniest prediction that two things I do at this point in my life, that they would be determined when I was, how old are you in fifth grade?
Yeah, like 10.
I just wish I listened. It took me a while to get back to that. I
Yeah,
was one of those resistors.
and that's one of the pieces in our report. They say that this is ingrained in you like DNA when you're 2. It's really young that you develop this profile. And, what I would say to the person who doesn't want to know, why? Why don't you want them to know who you are? Maybe work will be easier for you. Maybe they could make modifications to your job that you'll enjoy it more. Or maybe if you understand yourself and they understand you, and then you understand your manager, things will become a lot clearer as to why you work one way or another together. It's
That
only
is,
good in my eyes.
that's a really good insight to share with people, that it's to your benefit. It's not something that someone has over on you, that all of a sudden they know your type.
Right.
And that's how I think a lot of people go into those tests, which is funny when I speak
Yeah.
to them.
And I tell everybody it's 5 minutes. It's super quick. Please just try to answer it intuitively. And
Wait
it's
a
not
minute,
a
you have a 5-minute test people can take?
yes.
Really?
That quick. And some of them are very long, and it's so accurate and people love the results. And it's not a decision maker for us by any means. I want to say that as well. And anybody that I talk to in my talent acquisition space that uses them, I tell, don't use it as a disqualifier by any means. It should just be a contributing factor to your decision and understanding how this person works and analyzing that against the fit for your team and the role you're trying to fill. So
What
it's
are the kind of traits or characteristics that you see rise by taking, not rise in a career way, but become apparent through
yeah.
tests like that?
Yeah, so there's 4 main factors that we look at on the predictive index. Your ability to be assertive and want to take charge, or your ability to want to collaborate and go with the group decision. Your ability to be extroverted versus introverted. Your need for wanting a steady, predictable pace versus wanting something that changes all the time and variety in your work. Your level of detail that you need or that you don't need. Your structure, the lack of oversight or you want oversight. And it's all about how you work in your space. So once you understand that, you can say, to your manager who maybe is a micromanager, I don't need a ton of detail. If you wouldn't mind giving me a brief outline and letting me digest it, I'll come back to you with what I think is great and we can move on from there, or we can collaborate further on the details that you're looking for. But sometimes if I get like a 4-page email about an assignment, it's overwhelming for me because I'm not sure where to
Huh?
start. And I think being confident in understanding that about yourself and just asking for communication and to work together is a great way to develop a manager relationship. And, the manager may or may not be able to do that for you based on how the work is structured. But I think they'll have a level of respect that you understand who you are and you're just trying to work better together.
It's interesting insights you shared. If I go back to, I only had one job where I was hired my whole life, and that otherwise I've been self employed. But I remember I was in my late teens, and you went in, you were told what the job was, you did the job, and you did it with a smile, and you didn't question it. And that was just what you did. And I happened to love it. So I was very lucky. I was working at a health club. But today you hear people, you hear work conflicts arise. My boss doesn't understand me. Or the boss saying, I'm just having a tough time motivating. There's a different, now you could say this generationally happens with any generation, and I'm not a big fan of separating people by generation. I think it's more individual personalities. But what are you observing when you're coaching people, whether it's the client that's hiring someone or the worker, to bridge those communication gaps in how they are trying to embrace their job? Because everyone wants to do their best, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of misconceptions that come through with personality differences. And I think sometimes communications can be misconstrued and assumptions can be made that this person doesn't like me or this person doesn't work with me or whatever the case may be. And it boils down to something stylistic. And I think we start a lot of times with these assessments, especially in conflict resolution, to say, okay, let's get a baseline for who you are. And then let's look at the problem and see where there might have been a disconnect. And a lot of times, wow, I didn't even consider that. Or you were really ruminating on this one piece and it wasn't even a thought in my mind. And then we went to collaborate and it blew up or whatever it did. So I think that's a key piece, is understanding the baseline of where people are coming into scenarios. And once you do that, you automatically just have more grace for someone, more respect for someone, more understanding, because you're like, this is just who they are, right? This is what they need. Just like we all need air and food, maybe people need different types of food to really succeed and what's good for them. So I think it's really important to get that baseline and then understand, okay, now what is the work we're looking at? Where are the friction points? And are there any areas where we can bring in a different team member or tailor this work to be a little bit differently? Or maybe my expectations of what you deliver on a regular basis are modified. But baseline understanding, I think, is really important for going forward. Also, when it comes to hiring, I always tell people, when you're building out a team, I think it's important to understand that you want different types of personalities on your team. You may have had one person who was really successful in the role, and maybe they were a lot like you. And now you think, I need to continue to replicate that person. But you don't want a team of all the same type of person, because then really they're thinking similarly and they're probably not thinking outside the box or bringing in different ideas or challenging the group. So as your team grows, consider bringing a different type of personality into the mix and how their thought process may change the way you work for the better.
It's so funny you mentioned that because I every eight about every 8 weeks I start a new cohort of interns, and I usually have 2 or 3 in the office, and just to observe the different personalities, because these are high school students I'm training, and it is so fascinating to see how each I could have one thought or perspective on them from the minute I meet them, but give them by the end of the second week, when they're getting to feel more comfortable, the different personalities, the different strengths, with with a little bit of encouragement. Come on, you're doing great. I know you can do this. It's amazing how they unfold, and you get all this mix of personalities that all bring a lot of fun to the picture
Yeah.
and good work.
And different ways. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think there's beauty in diversity, there's beauty in differences. Again, when I approach PI, to your earlier point, I never tell people to try to be what they think the test should say. Just be who you are. You really want to understand who you are. Otherwise, you're going to be chasing this job and feeling like you're not good at it. And that never feels good. When you get into a job that you're naturally good at because you aligned it to who you are, that just feels so much better, so much quicker.
Yeah. Now, you have really coached some very interesting work transitions. Okay. If you take an athlete, a professional football player who has, really led an exceptional life, they've been on the field, they know what that glory is, they have crowds cheering for them and booing for them. So it goes both ways. And now that career's ending and it's time to move forward. How do you coach someone through that kind of transition? What does that look like?
We start at the baseline. We get a baseline of who they are. And a lot of times I say, did you ever take a moment to really understand who you are outside of your sport? Because it's probably been a large chunk of your life where that was the main focus and that was everything. But there's a whole life after that sport ends. And we want it to be a fulfilling life for you. And we also want it to be one where you feel like you found a new purpose and explored different areas of so starting with that baseline gives us a good understanding of who are you at the core. And now let's start exploring different areas that you'd be interested in. And then once we get to those jobs, now let's pull in all your transferable skills from sports and talk about how you're a very different candidate for the hiring manager than what they may see coming through their applicant tracking system.
Right. That you're a team player, that you can thrive in pressure situations. Yeah.
Be on the
Very interesting.
be analytical. There's a lot of really innate traits that
Take
Smart.
directions fast, memorize plays.
Resiliency, taking constructive feedback. That's a big one. Yeah.
Well, I want to address the elephant in everyone's room right now. You cannot go on to you can't go onto your phone without seeing AI. There's a lot of fear in the workplace right now. Will I be replaced? Will my job still exist 3 years from now? Will it be here 5 years from now? How are you encouraging people? This is going to be a two-part question, but I'll start with part one. So let's say first, how are you encouraging people to embrace AI today to get better and more valuable in their current positions?
Yeah. It's coming no matter what, right? I think it's just about how quickly you adopt it and where you can see the efficiencies early on. You'll start to, if you're in a current job, you'll start to prove to your employer that you're resourceful and you're tech forward and you're understanding this landscape. And hey, I'm getting ahead of what pieces of my job I can already automate, so you don't have to do that for me. So I can give you the feedback that, hey, I was able to do this 5 times faster because I offloaded this piece to AI. And now I've carved out 10% of my role, 15% of my role where I can take on something different, where I can learn and grow. Let me take that to my next review and say, hey, I've created so much efficiency. I'd love to learn more in this space. I'd love to help more in this space.
So
I think
you're encouraging people to be proactive instead of hide it, like keep it as their secret. Oh, I'm doing this, but I don't want them to know. You're
right.
saying
Yeah.
own it, show you know it, show you can use it.
Most organizations are trying to get there. Unless your organization is saying to you, no, we want nothing to do. You may be in a space where they don't want anything to do with AI. And I'm sure you'll know that from your employer. But I think most organizations are trying to find efficiencies with AI. And if you can get ahead and find the efficiencies in your own role, you've probably done your manager's job or HR's job or somebody's job in the organization that's trying to optimize with technology. I mean, it's like anything that we use. At one point, we were just pen and paper, and now we're all on computers, right? So if we had to put things through the mail to do our work every day versus using email, how efficient would we be? I think there's going to be a time when it's the same thing for AI. But I think what's interesting now is there's a lot of fear because AI can be like human. But the reality is you have to teach AI. It's not born with a brain. So whatever we're feeding it and whatever we're prompting it is going to give us back that information. So humans will always be up here, right? Because it's just a computer. So I say get ahead of it. I say learn it. Take a AI essentials course. Google has some certifications. I wouldn't be afraid.
Now, there are a lot of people thinking either about retiring or not retiring and staying in the workforce, but maybe in a different role. So, what would you say to people who are saying, I want to keep working, but I've done this a long time. I want to shift. I want to do XYZ for the
Yeah.
next few years instead. And that shift could happen obviously at any age. You could be 24 years old or 30 and say, well, I've been a lawyer this many years. I don't want to be in a courtroom ever again. So how do you encourage people to go about transitioning and prepare themselves for new possibilities?
I think there's two different, there's various paths, but two that come to mind for me are I don't want to work full time anymore. I have a large skill set and years of experience, and I still want to use that and maybe explore a different industry or gain some new challenges. Fractional consulting is becoming really popular. So organizations are saying, hey, I need an interim marketing person, or I need an interim HR person, or we have project-based work that we really need extra support for. That's becoming a lot more common. And I think that's a nice transition later in life to say, I'm going to take my hours down from 50 hours a week to 20 hours a week, but still really give the value to the people I'm working with that I've accumulated over all of these years in my expertise. And then there's another path of transition happening that I've coached on where I've had a long career at a long organization and I got laid off. Really want to use the rest of my years to use my experience, but marry it with a personal passion. And in that case, The transition can be a little bit harder, but again, I go back to the passion piece. We all have one life to live here. And how beautiful would it be if you can use your experience and take your passion and pitch yourself to an organization in that space and say, I can do X, Y, and Z for you. And on top of it, I bring this really strong passion about this space. And let me tell you why. And I think as a hiring manager, sitting back and understanding that and seeing that from a candidate is really exciting.
Mhm.
When you have somebody who's really invested in your business, sky's the limit for what you can accomplish. And you know you're really getting the most out of that person. So it's a little bit of different paths here, but I see two clear ones of take your workload down, still contribute, still get your expertise. And maybe I'm not ready to take my workload down, but I want to do something that's a little bit more meaningful to me and
Mm.
communicate that passion.
How do you define the difference between purpose and passion?
Mm. I
Because people talk about them both and they kind of use them interchangeably. And then people say, well, I know what my purpose is, but I don't feel passionate about it. Or I have this passion, but I'm not sure it's my purpose.
yeah, yeah. I think people identify purpose differently.
Hmm.
Is your purpose because of experience or is your purpose like in your soul? I call myself a purpose driven person, how I do work, right? I'm really passionate about my work because of the help that it's giving to others. And therefore, I become passionate about the work.
I love how you explained that.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
It's different. I think you have to ask yourself, what are you here for? Some people, their purpose is to make money and they want to make money and therefore they're passionate about their job and making money. That's okay. Right?
Hmm.
I think you just need to find what that is and follow it. And in that, at least what I've seen is the work just becomes that much more meaningful and you're that much more happy to do it. And people want to work with people who are happy at their jobs.
Hmm.
That's just what it is.
If someone said, Joanna, I want to work with you. I want you to help me find my passion. I want you to help me identify where I would be best in life. Where could I make money? Where could I be most fulfilled? I mean, that's a big ask.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a big ask. What would be core questions, let's say 3 to 5 questions, besides a personality test that you might start to ask that person to draw out from them so they start to come up with their own answers that they can feed them back to you?
It would probably be a lot of self-discovery. What does your life look like? Where does your
Mhm.
mind go when you have the space to just let it go? Where do you like to spend your time? What's important to you? Are there any causes that you're tied to closely? I think it comes back to if they've had some experience, what didn't you like about your past experiences?
Mhm.
If you could pick an ideal job, what would it be and why? Once you start getting them talking, you can start to pick out pieces and then you can take those questions back to them. I've had people that I've coached before that, really were entrepreneurs at heart and maybe started their own business. And for one reason or another, it didn't work out. COVID was a factor, timing. And then they're coming to me saying, I think I need to pivot. I think I need to find a new area. And through conversation and discovering the path of what had happened to get them there it's a lot of these things that happened to you were time related. And if we go back to how you got here originally and we restart, can we reignite this that you have this path that you have a ton of experience in already? And can we keep going on that path and not be so discouraged about what may have happened in a defined time period because there were external factors to what got you there? But when you're that person in that scenario, it's really hard to zoom out and see it from that perspective.
Well, you're making me self-reflect on your answer because it's funny. I mean, I think until I started my investor relations firm, I'm sure I was like almost the running joke in my family. And I didn't start that till I was 35. And I had many businesses and always paid my own bills, but I would do them until I was bored. And then I would start a new business. And then sometimes I would start a new business, do all the work for it. 24 hours after I launched is when one in particular stands out. I thought I was going to be this little trivia, everybody. I thought I was going to be a manicurist. And I took all the courses. I think I was 18 or 19, took all the courses, got everything, went out, couldn't wait to buy all the nail polish, bought all the things. The first person who answered my ad told me they had a terrible smell. They had a terrible smell coming that they couldn't see, and they thought it was coming from their feet. And could I help them? And in that split second, I said, I just can't be met. So I ask people, I share that story because it shows that sometimes you don't get things right all the time. But we are all about honesty on this show. But what it also shows is I say to people a lot, sometimes what you think is a hobby or fun
Mm-hmm.
is just a hobby or fun.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you want to make it a full-time job.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And how do you help people identify what's the hobby or fun versus, okay, are you really ready to commit the time, effort, energy, maybe change of your whole financial being and, income to get this off the ground or to go into this area
Right.
as a career versus a hobby?
Yeah. And a lot of times the first question is, can you afford this? And
I
that's a
always say to
big,
people, don't quit your day job
right.
until you
Right.
really know.
And maybe you don't quit your day job. Is your life set up that you can do your day job and stand this up and still have all of your other obligations? There's passion and there's purpose and there's dreams and there's reality. And when we can marry them, that's beautiful. Sometimes it's, I want this to be my long-term goal, but I know I need to sacrifice X, Y, or Z until it can be. And you're aware of that and you're comfortable going into this situation because you've already understood that. I think a lot of times, sometimes people chase their dreams and then say, "Oh, I had no idea how hard this would be. I had no idea how long it would be for this to take off, or I had no idea what the investment would be." So again, it's like that reality of marrying the both. Here's where you're really excited and you actually could see this as your life and a dream for you. Now, does your current situation offer that flexibility? And if it's not right now, do you want to extend your timeline longer to get there? Or is that not worth it for you either? I can't tell you that answer. Only you can tell yourself that answer.
It's a good answer. I have a good friend who's a very, very big record producer. And when we go out to dinner every couple of months, invariably people will recognize him and come over to the table and say, oh my God, I want to know what it takes to become big in the record business. And I want to be, I think I've got all the talent. And can you give me a piece of advice? And he goes, don't quit your day job.
Yeah.
And I can see the pain in the person's face when they hear that. And one point I said to him, like, why do you give that answer? It's so harsh. It sounds arrogant. It sounds like you're blowing them off. He goes, I'm giving them the best advice they could ever get. Because people think, oh, I'm going to be a musician and I'm going to quit my job. Everyone's going to notice how great I am. And he goes, and nobody takes into account how many dive bars you play before maybe you get that break.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Especially in that type of entertainment industry, sometimes people can go undiscovered for a really long time. So
Forever.
I agree with him. I think that that's an extra hard type of career, and it's so artistically driven and tied to society at the times. There's a lot that goes into that. So I heed his advice. I think that that's important.
You said something interesting earlier, too, that I've always related to. You said something about time. Notice where the time passes quickly. And that is what I've said to people when they say, I'm trying to find my passion or my purpose. I say, well, what is it you're doing that you don't even notice?
Yeah.
I've been fortunate. I felt like that my whole life. My day is over and I'm like, wow, where did that go?
Yeah.
I need another 10 hours to have some more of this fun. And that's been no matter what I've done. But I feel incredibly fortunate for feeling that way. It's putting in that work, but you don't feel like it's work. You're just doing it. You're saying, what can I do the next day?
Right. And I think a lot of the people that come to me in their transition, or I've gotten laid off, or I need to get out of this job, it comes from a place of, and not always to this degree, but some desperation, right? I need to get there. I need to have security. I don't feel secure now. There's unknown around this. And in that unknown piece, I think it can get really hard to take a step back and say, but what do I really want? Because there's a drop to just have the answer. But that's why I try to reroute people there of like, please just take a moment to think about who you are and what you want. And that is going to be fundamental to how we move forward and what steps we take and what directions we go. Because if you don't know that, then we're really just shooting in the dark and hoping that it works out.
Yeah. My gosh, the time for these always goes too quick. But one thing we didn't talk about is resumes. And I really think that's a topic I would be remiss if we don't address.
Yeah.
When you are coaching people right now, I've spoken with different people and they'd say, oh no, I see the job and I just, I know AI is now looking at all the resumes. So I just take the job description and I tell AI, put all the job description into my resume, and that's what I submit.
Yeah. Yeah. And then how are you going to answer those questions when they're interviewing you off your resume that you don't even really know what it says or what they're saying you did? That can be really tricky. I get it
Yeah,
from
I wanna know, what's your advice? Because 'Cause I'm sure you get it. You're
yeah.
on both sides.
Yeah, I see them come through, the applicant tracking systems and how they're using AI is still a really hot topic in legislation, and it's all very new. So I'm sure there'll be more that'll come out from that, but systems do pick up keywords. I tell people include keywords, not paragraphs, phrases, exact lines, or anything like that. But ask yourself, okay, do I have experience with this software? Do I have experience in this space? And then you need to translate that work into what applies that you've done. So AI can give you maybe a baseline and do some of the work for you, but you have to go through it and ask yourself, is this actually what I did? If someone reads me back this line, will I know what they're talking about on an interview? Because if you don't, the interview's probably going to be over.
Yeah. That is really good advice. I mean, that is really good advice because I've seen it come in when I've hired people, and I'm like, "Wait a second. They just cut and pasted my
Yeah.
entire head into their resume. There's no way this is such a match." And
Right.
and not only that, half the time I don't even wanna interview them because I just feel like, the BS meter
Right.
that I'm
Right.
old enough to have a fairly good one. That's the white hair. You see it enough, you say, you know,
Yeah. And I
it's
think
almost like I'm looking for mistakes in cover letters these days.
well, and that's where you use AI to your advantage. You write your cover letter and then you have AI go over it and fine tune it for you and make it a little bit easier to read or catch any mistakes that you've made. Like there is value in having AI, but don't let it try to be someone that you're not. That is going to come through in the interview. And to your point, you're trying to develop a level of trust right off the bat. And you've really diminished that early on. And that's probably not what you were going after.
Mhm.
So consider that. And would you want someone to do that to you?
There's a whole new group of people, once again this year, that are graduating from high school or college and choosing to enter the job market. What would be your words of wisdom? Because we're coming towards the end of this. What would be your words of wisdom to encourage those entering the workforce career wise for possibly their first time?
Yeah. Those entering the workforce at a typical college age, I think you have the advantage of AI on your side and technology. Use that to your advantage because these generations that have been in the workforce longer are trying to adapt to it now. So, how do you come out of the gate saying, this is something I used in college. This is something I'm super comfortable with. I'm very tech savvy. That's really appealing to a hiring manager. And I think can offset you from the group that's coming through that maybe isn't pushing forward, that's where their skill set is. That'd probably be my biggest piece. Yeah, I think you have an edge that you probably don't know you have because it's innate to you. It's like a couple of years ago, probably more than a couple of years ago now, but like when the rise of social media
Yeah.
became apparent. And then all of these jobs came up in marketing around social media. And these young kids who are really savvy just because of their own personal interest can swipe up these jobs left and right. That in AI, that can be the same type of platform. Are you using it in school right now? How are you using it in your daily life? Because it's just natural to you because you're younger and more adept to learning new technology. Use that to your
Well,
advantage.
that's interesting. And you use the social media example. And to extend it, I would say Not just know that you know AI, but really acknowledge that you know different platforms within
Mhm.
it and
Yeah.
what each one differentiates. Like that Gamma will help you do I think it's Gamma, will help you do a PowerPoint presentation, and Claude will help you write a great letter, and Chat will answer a general question, and Perplexity can bring in the math quotient
Yep. Yep.
better than maybe the others because they're all very different. They all, just
Yeah.
like social media, when I would interview people for social media roles and they'd say, I really know social media. And then I'd find out they really only knew Instagram.
Right. Right.
And I'd say, well, what about Facebook? And they're like, oh, no, my mom's on Facebook. I'm like, well, so are a lot of people all over the world. So you need to learn Facebook or you need to LinkedIn or when is Pinterest appropriate or X because
Yep.
they're all different.
Right, right, and have different usages. And maybe, right, you have this baseline understanding of a few AI techs, but because you're comfortable in that space, you're interviewing for a job in healthcare, you do some research on some healthcare AI, and then you can plug that on your interview. Hey, are you guys using this software? I know this is up and coming in your space. I'd love to learn more about it. It seems like it's similar to, that's a great conversation piece.
Yeah. Joanna, this time just went too fast. You are a treasure trove of information.
I'm always
Seriously.
here for a conversation.
I really enjoyed this. We are going to have to do it again.
Yes.
I've been speaking with Joanna Chavers, who is a vice president at Atrium Global, a human resources firm with multiple capabilities. So I'm going to encourage you to look at their website. I'm certainly encouraging you to follow Joanna because she shares lots of good tips and ideas. Any last one that we should end with, Joanna?
Yourself. I know it's so corny, but
It's not.
really, truly, I think we're here for as much time as we have and live this life how it means to you. You'll be happiest.
I'm so glad you said that because I truly believe that if you believe life's a gift, then you have to believe that you are a gift. And your responsibility to owning that gift is to be yourself. Bring it to the world, own
Yeah.
it, be proud of it. Don't
Yeah.
apologize for it. Be it. Don't ask for people to accept it. Just be it. Be
Yes.
you.
Yeah. Unapologetically you.
Yeah. Okay, I'm Diane Brissell. This has been the Silver Disobedience Perception Dynamics podcast. I've been speaking with Joanna Chavers from Atrium Global. I highly encourage you to follow her. There will be all kinds of links below where you can get in touch with her, stay in touch, pay attention to what she's posting and sharing because she truly is a wealth of knowledge. So share this with anyone you know who's in the job market, thinking about going into the job market, thinking about a change, because Joanna's a woman who is a force of nature and someone who shared lots of good insights in this episode. So thank you. Hit subscribe, everyone, follow, and share. And see you
Thank
next time.
you.